For many people, their first introduction to Frisian and its relation to the English language came from watching a documentary clip called Mongrel Nation, in which Eddie Izzard goes to the province of Friesland in the north of the Netherlands and, using just Old English, tries to buy a brown cow from a Frisian farmer who seems to understand fairly well what he means. Having studied both Frisian and Old English, I thought it might be quite nice to make a video about the Frisian perspective on this video and to look at exactly what is said in English, in Old English, and in Frisian.
Oi! So in theory, I should be able to speak to a farmer in Old English. He should be able to reply to me in Frisian, and we should be able to understand one another.
Hello. Hello, ik spreek Old English.
So Eddie starts off by saying something like, "Hallo, ik spreek Old English." Now, it's important to distinguish between what Eddie says, and he has a good crack at the Old English, and the actual Old English as it should be pronounced, because these sometimes do diverge. So if we were to render this into, let's say, standardized Old English, you'd get something like "Ela, ich spreche Old English." So slightly different to what he says, but in actual fact, what Eddie says is closer to the Frisian pronunciation. So in Frisian, this would be something like, "Hallo, ik spreek Oud Engelsk." So with the ik rather than the ich and the sprek again, it is fairly similar. So really, this is mutually intelligible between the Old English and what Eddie says, and between the Frisian too. How about the next bit?
Understandest thou me?
So Eddie then asks something like, "Understandest thou me?" which is from the Old English, "Understandst thou me?" However, in Frisian, this is a little bit different. We don't have the understand. We have instead "Versteest thou mij?" And the "thou" actually you don't need to say, nor do you need to say it in the Old English, because of course the ending, the understandst, shows who it's being directed to. The versteest is quite interesting because that steest is actually from stan, which means to stand. So it's actually saying, "For stand you me." So it's a similar construction as the modern English understand, but they have used a different preposition in it. So this actually isn't mutually intelligible, as the farmer then says.
Ja.
Ja?
Maar dat versteer ik niet. Nee. Nee.
So the farmer, or the boer in Frisian, replies, "Maar dat verstaan ik net," which means, or in the Old English would be, "Ak ich understande that ne," or something similar, which is, "But that I don't understand." Now note, with the Old English, I've been fairly liberal with the syntax. You can be more liberal with Old English syntax because it doesn't have to have as strict syntactic rules as modern English and modern Frisian do. And so I've sort of put the words in where they match up with the words. So we can see, "But I understand that not."
Ik ben een Fries.
The farmer then continues by saying, "Ik ben een Fries," which means I am a Frisian, and in Old English would be "Ich beo an Frisa." So both of these are quite similar, but now in English we have lost the beo form and we use am instead, which is quite interesting. And also that the word Frisian is actually a loan from Old French, frison, and has displaced the older English form, which was Frisa, which is much closer to the modern Frisian form, Fries.
Ik wil boeren een bruine koe.
So Eddie now goes in and asks to buy a brown cow. So he says something like, "Ik wil boeren een bruine koe," which rendered into Old English would be, "Ich wil boeren een bruine koe." And in Frisian, that would be, "Ik wil kopen een bruine koe." Although that is actually using the syntax as he has used. In modern Frisian, you're more likely to structure that sentence as, "Ik wil een bruine koe kopen." And this is quite important because this shows the importance of syntax in mutual intelligibility as much as anything else. This is obvious because the farmer replies,
Een bruine koe?
a brune koe.
Een bruine koe, ja, ja, ja.
The farmer here has quite clearly understood that the subject of the sentence is een brune koe, or an brune koe, the brown cow, because that is almost identical in all of these languages. In fact, the Old English, the indefinite article an is closer to the Frisian un rather than the English a. However, there is a part of the sentence that he hasn't understood, and this is the verb.
Ja. Brune koe. Ik wil boetjen. Boetjen.
In Boetisch?
Boetjes?
Boetisch, Boetisch.
Boetjes.
Where the communication breaks down, it's because Eddie has used the Old English verb boetjan for to buy. However, we can see that the Old Frisian word is clearly not related to boetjan, and the modern Frisian word is gapier, to buy. It's from a different root. In fact, that the Old English root boetjan, which is also the ancestor of the modern English word to buy, is from the reconstructed Proto-Germanic of bugjanon, whereas the Old Frisian kapia, which is the ancestor of the modern Frisian word kapia, is from a different Proto-Germanic root, kauporno. What's interesting is that there is actually an English cognate, a modern English cognate to kapia, which is the word cheap. And in fact, the surname Chapman comes from Caepmon, which was a merchant, basically a buy man. However, now the modern English and the modern Frisian are so different that if one were to use buy and the other capia, it's not obvious that these mean the same thing. And so the communication breaks down at this point, the farmer not having understood that the action intended in the sentence is that Eddie wants to buy a brown cow.
Brune koe, brune koe, brune koe, ja? Ja? Dat maakt mietje, milche.
So here Eddie says something like, that maketh miche milche. Whereas in Old English that would be, that maketh michel or michel, depending on the dialect, melk or milch. Now in Frisian that would be, dat maakt een soort molke. There isn't a cognate with the word Mitchell in Frisian, and so it's again quite a different construction there. But actually, in the more common syntax in Frisian, you would render this sentence as dat een soort molke maakt. Now, this is incredibly important because you'll note that maakt is the verb to make. However, the verb is most of the time final in the Frisian language. And that's important here because, of course, what Eddie is saying is miche, milche, and milk is the final word. The noun is the final word there. And this is why the farmer responds in this way.
Ja, je wil hem melken.
Melke.
Melken.
Melke.
Melken.
Melke.
Ja.
The farmer replies with jo volle melke, or which in Old English would be something like je wille melkan or melchan, which is you want to milk and basically milk a cow. The reason is because he has heard the milchan, which actually is the noun in the Old English, in that he wants much milk. But because it appears last in the sentence, the Frisian has interpreted milk or milchan as the verb, and so he thinks he means to milk a cow, and that is how he replies.
Ja, je wil die bruine koe in Engeland melken.
He goes on to say, "Jo volle die brune koe in Engeland melken," which I've put into Old English, again with very loose syntax, as something like Je wille tha brune koe melkan in Engeland, which is you want to milk that brown cow in England, or to use the same syntactical structure throughout. But this appears to be quite hard for Eddie to understand. The Engeland seems to be just too far from England, which has a more pronounced ending in English, for him to understand. And again, I think the different position of where the verb is makes it quite difficult for Eddie to understand the exact sense of what is being said here, rather than the gist that it's about a brown cow and something to do with milk.
Engeland melken.
Ja, in Engeland melken.
Oké.
Ja.
Ja.
Van de cheese en van de boter.
Maar de cheese,
Ja.
cheese en de boter. Ja, cheese is...
And then the boer or the farmer replies with for the cheese and for the butter, which in Old English would be something like for the cheese and for that butteran. And in English, for the cheese and for the butter. And this Eddie understands, and pretty much every English speaker will understand because it's so close. But what's interesting here is that the modern English and the modern Frisian are actually closer because both of them no longer have a real case system when it comes to nouns. And so instead of setchise, which is masculine in Old English, and that buteran, which is in the neuter and the accusative, both of them in the Old English, instead both English, Modern English and Frisian just have the nouns in exactly the same form, and also the definite article, the de, is only ever de or the. That never changes, and that's something that they are both now closer to than with Old English and Modern Frisian. Trust that with German, another related language that still has a case system, it's für den Käse und für die Butter, because the two have a different gender in German, and so they have different definite article forms.
Old English.
Yeah.
Chase is good.
Yeah.
The Brunko now.
So there's another example of that here where Eddie actually makes a mistake in the Old English, but it again makes it closer to the modern Frisian just because of how these languages have developed when he says de Brunko now, and then which should be Seo Bruneku nu, which sounds quite funny in Old English, and in modern Frisian is de Bruneko no. So again, he's actually just using the, probably just from the in English rather than, because cow is feminine, so it should be Seo Bruneku, but it makes it closer to the modern Frisian.
Ja,
See the Brunko?
ja, ja. Wij gaan naar de Brune Ko.
Okay.
So the farmer replies with Wij gaan naar de brune ko, which would be something like We gath there brune ki. Again, that there is just a different definite article because it's a different case here, going into the dative case because they're going to the dative cow, to the cow, the brown cow. Whereas modern English and modern Frisian no longer have any cases in their nouns, so they just say we go to the brown cow, and this is really easy enough. Especially if you know any dialectal English, any Northern English dialects like the Geordie dialect that has we gaan instead of we go, so we can see even more connections in some more archaic dialectal forms of English there. So yeah, on the whole, I would say that was a fairly successful interaction using Old English, or some mistakes in there, but that's fine, with Frisian, and being able to understand the vague sense of what is going on. I don't think that Eddie has realized that the farmer thinks he just wants to milk his cow rather than buying his cow because the verbs are too different. But on the whole, I think this is a very interesting demonstration, and it certainly got a lot of people interested in Frisian and its relationship with English, and indeed with these older Germanic languages, which is something I absolutely praise. If your interest has been piqued, then feel free to check out some of the other videos that I have about Frisians here on the channel, which will be linked below and should appear on the side in the suggestions. And if you're new, why not subscribe and hit the bell icon, most importantly of all, so that you are updated when I upload a new video on various topics. If you have anything else to add, if you're Frisian or if you've studied Old English or you would like to do either of those things, then don't forget to leave a comment behind. I do try and answer some of the comments as I go, but there are a lot of people commenting, so it's not always possible. Give me a thumbs up to show me that you enjoyed the video too, and share it with anyone that you think would find this interesting. If you are one of those people that does want to find out more and you're on Facebook, there is a group on there called Early Medieval Frisia and Frisians, which I run together with some other experts in the field on early medieval Frisian studies, who also post some of their research in there. It's a great community, so I would highly recommend you to check it out and join up if you're interested. There'll be a link in the description below. Anyway, until the next time, tusen tak, and that was Norwegian actually. I don't know why I said it in Norwegian. Tir dank, I should say in Frisian, and on